Hello and good afternoon. This webinar series, Best Practices in Research Administration, is being presented by Encura with the financial support of Eurasia Foundation and the U.S. Department of State. To download this presentation, please go to the handout section of your control panel. We will have 15 minutes of Q&A at the end of the webinar. Please send your questions via the chat box in your control panel. My name is Tricia Callahan, and I am the Director of Proposal Development at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. This webinar is the second webinar in a 5-part series on best practices in research administration. Today's learning objectives include understanding the key components of a funding opportunity announcement, how and where to locate funding announcements, special considerations to keep in mind when searching for a funding source, and how to search for funding using standard search terms and operators. Also, I will cover some general tips on matching project objectives with the sponsor's mission. At the end of this presentation, I have provided some agency links to which non-U.S. participants can apply. Let's get started. It all begins with a funding opportunity announcement. This slide shows the life cycle of a project supported by grant funds. Today we will focus at the very beginning prior to submission. Here is when we search for a funding opportunity announcement and make certain we have a good match between what we want to do and what the sponsor is willing to fund. In this section, I will cover key components of a standard funding opportunity announcement. Typically, when we are talking about funding opportunity announcements, we are talking about notices for federal programs. Much of this will also apply to announcements for non-federal organizations. A funding opportunity announcement, often called an FOA, will typically list the name of the awarding agency. For example, the National Science Foundation or the Spencer Foundation. The title of the funding opportunity, which should give you insights as to what is being funded. The type of announcement. Is this a new funding opportunity, or is this a modification of an existing announcement? A modification may be issued to clarify instructions, to change the due date, or requirements of the program. Therefore, it is important that you have the most up-to-date announcement and any modifications to the announcement. This reminds me that some announcements point to additional guidelines, like guidelines for online submissions. It is important that you have all the applicable guidelines prior to writing the proposal. Most FOAs, particularly those issued by U.S. federal funding agencies, also include a catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance Number, or CFDA number. A CFDA number is a 5-digit number assigned to most federal grants and cooperative agreements. The CFDA itself is a collection of federal program announcements and services that provide assistance to the American public. Also included in the FOA are due dates and other key dates. U.S. federal funding agencies are required to issue their FOAs 60 days prior to the submission date, which isn't always a lot of time to put together a competitive proposal. A link to the CFDA website has been provided at the bottom of this slide. This is a screenshot of a typical funding opportunity announcement. As you can see, the program is being funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. It includes the Department of Energy's funding opportunity announcement and a CFDA number. You can also see this announcement was issued on October 12th of 2016 and tells us that a pre-application is due by December 19th. Applicants submitting a preliminary proposal should hear back from the DOE by January 6th. Full proposals are due by March 20th. For some programs, if the preliminary application is not invited, the agency will not accept a full application. Other programs, like this one, if the pre-application is discouraged, an applicant may still be able to submit the proposal. However, it is not likely to be funded. Finally, notice that this is an amended FOA. The announcement has been amended to include an updated link to the guidelines and the application package on Grants.gov. As previously mentioned, it is important to read all updates. Before going on, I want to talk about Grants.gov since it is mentioned here. Grants.gov is an online system where applicants to U.S. federal funding programs can find information about the programs and apply to the programs. I will cover more on Grants.gov in a later slide. In addition to the name of the sponsoring agency, the program title, and due dates, the FOA will give a full description of the program and will include eligibility information. The full FOA will also provide instructions or links to instructions on how to apply. It is important that you download all instructions in addition to the FOA. The full FOA will also provide the criteria by which applications are reviewed. It is important that our applicants are aware of these criteria and write to these criteria. These criteria form the basis for scoring the proposal during the review process. Finally, the FOA will provide information on how an award is to be administered if funded. This is important if you are not at an organization that is used to administering a U.S. federal award. You should ask yourself, do we have the capacity and infrastructure to take on this award? And can we meet all of the award conditions? This table shows the table of contents for a full funding opportunity announcement. At 39 pages, this FOA is short compared to some. As you can see, the full announcement includes a description of the program, a lot of information about the type of award, such as the maximum award size, duration of the award, and applicant eligibility information. It also includes information on how to submit the application and the application review criteria. Now we will move on to types of funding mechanisms and types of funding announcements. In sponsored research, we often talk about gifts versus grants. The focus of today will be on assistance programs and procurement, not on gifts. A gift typically comes with no strings attached, meaning that if we accept the funds, we are under no obligation to report back to the sponsoring agency on our program success or on how we spent the funds. With a grant or assistance award, we do have a responsibility for letting the sponsor know if we reached our objectives and how the funds were used. A grant is a type of financial assistance given by one organization to another for a specific purpose, Grant proposals are written to obtain resources needed to accomplish goals. A grant differs from other sources of financial assistance, such as fellowships or cooperative agreements, in that grants are typically made to organizations, not individuals. Grants usually restrict how funds can be spent. Grants usually require reporting on what is accomplished. And the grant awarding agency typically has no involvement in the grant activities. Assistance awards, shown here, can be grants or cooperative agreements. With a grant, our investigators propose to the sponsor a project or research they want to conduct. There is very little sponsor say in how the research is being conducted. With a cooperative agreement, there is more interaction between the sponsor and the investigator. With procurement, shown on the right side of the slide, an agency has specific work in mind, and they are looking to contract with someone to do that specific work. It is a purchase service. I make the distinction between assistance and procurement mechanisms because where we find announcements for each differs. Note also that only grants and cooperative agreements have CFDA numbers. This slide just shows the top federal programs who provide assistance awards. Assistance programs are announced in Grants.gov, on agency websites, in the CFDA, and in the Federal Register. This is a document that publishes announcements, rules, and programs. FOAs are also announced on fee-based databases and in newsletters. I will cover each of these later in the presentation. The program announcements for unsolicited financial assistance are often referred to as PAs, or program announcements, FOAs, funding opportunity announcements, or RFAs, requests for applications. Unsolicited programs are standing programs to which applicants can apply during a posted time frame or on a specific date. Programs that are not standing or unsolicited are called solicited, meaning an agency is actively trying to get applications in a particular area. They are seeking or requesting specific applications. Solicited programs can use grants, cooperative agreements, or contracts as the award mechanism. Solicited programs are primarily announced on agency website and in Fed Biz Ops, a marketplace for federal procurement opportunities. The program announcements of the solicited type are referred to as requests for proposals, requests for quotes, requests for bid, or broad agency announcements. Now let's talk about things to keep in mind prior to searching for a funding opportunity announcement. Finding a funding source that matches project goals can be challenging. There are a number of factors to take into consideration when searching for a perfect sponsor, one whose mission closely matches your project goals. It is important to understand a bit about what one wants to do before searching for a funding announcement. If there is not good agreement between the intent of the project and the sponsor's mission, then chances are that the application will not be successful. Knowing something about the nature of the project or research, the scope and duration of the project, and how much the budget might be can help direct you to the appropriate funding source. For example, If the nature of the research is to determine how the immune system reacts to vaccination, then likely you want to look at programs supported by the National Institute of Health and not the National Science Foundation. This is because the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, supports biomedical research, and the NSF does not. It is important that you understand the mission of the funding agency. For example, the mission of NIH is to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems, and to use that knowledge to lengthen life and reduce illness and disability. It is important to understand the structure of the funding agency. For example, the NIH is made up of 27 centers and institutes, each with their own priorities and objectives. If you are looking at the NIH to support your immunology research, you probably want to begin with the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Once at this institute, you will want to see if they had unsolicited programs that support your research. It's also important to review what this institute has funded recently and what programs they are currently funding. You might also look to see if they have a special solicited announcement out that matches what you want to do. If you find an agency or program that appears to be a good match, it's important to contact the programmatic contact or program officer prior to submitting the proposal. This will ensure you are on the right track. This slide is a guide to help direct you as to where to focus your funding search efforts. Please note that the currency listed is in US dollars. If your budget needs are small, say $1,000 or less, and the impact of the research is not broad, you might want to look internally or for local resources to support your project. If the budget and duration of the project are large, you might want to look at larger foundations, U.S. federal funding agencies, or even to Horizon 2020, especially if your project has global impact. Knowing something about the possible size of the budget, the duration of the project, and the potential impact can help direct your sponsor-seeking efforts. So where do you find information about a sponsor, about their mission, and what they fund? Typically, this is provided on the sponsor website. If you don't know what sponsor to explore, then using the CFDA or Grants.gov to point you to a particular sponsor will help. You can also use a fee-based subscription service. We will cover all of these soon. Now let's turn to resources for finding a sponsoring agency. I've already mentioned a large source of funding for assistance programs is the U.S. federal government. There are 26 federal agencies that provide assistance awards, such as the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Education, Energy, and more. This slide shows an overview as to what is to come. First, let's talk about Grants.gov. As mentioned previously, Grants.gov is an online site where you can find and apply to federal opportunity announcements. This is a screenshot of the Grants.gov homepage. You can see in the top right that you can search for a federal funding opportunity. The menu across the top provides information on grant writing, searching for grants, applying for federal grants through the Grants.gov portal, standard grant forms, and information on Grants.gov. The tab in the menu listed applicants provides information on how to register with Grants.gov, and walks you through the steps for being able to apply for and accept federal funds. For example, it goes through how to obtain a DUNS number. This identifies the physical location of an organization. It also shows you how to register with the System for Award Management and how to create a Grants.gov username and password. For today's purposes, Grants.gov is where you likely want to begin when searching for a federal grant opportunity. Grants.gov has a complete list of the 26 federal grant awarding agencies and has a search tool by keyword for finding federal funding announcements. Here you can see in the top right that you can conduct a simple search using a keyword, like immunology, for example. In addition to using a keyword, you can do a more advanced search. You can search using an instrument type, such as a grant, cooperative agreement, or contract. You can search by eligibility, whether you are an individual, a for-profit entity, or an institution of higher education. Or you can search by unrestricted eligibility for those programs that have no restrictions. You can search by certain categories, such as art, agriculture, health. And you can search by a particular agency. Again, all the federal granting agencies are listed here. The resulting search here shows the funding opportunity number, the title of the program, the status of the opportunity, whether it is open, archived, or forecasted to come, the date the opportunity was posted, and the date the opportunity closes, which isn't the due date. Instead, this is the date that the opportunity will no longer be available. While state funds are likely not applicable for entities outside the U.S., I have included them here because there might be times when our investigators want to collaborate with someone outside the U.S. on a state-funded initiative. It may be the case that the non-U.S. counterpart cannot receive funds, but I'll talk later about unfunded collaborations. It also may be the case that some funds may be used for travel to the U.S. or for the U.S. investigator to travel outside the U.S. In the example here with the Ohio Humanities Council, they may support a proposal that would allow us to bring a non-U.S. collaborator to give a lecture on a particular topic in the humanities. Finding state funding can be difficult. Knowing the state agencies and going to their websites to look at program information is the best way to learn about these funding opportunities. Soon I will talk about fee-based searchable databases. State funding programs typically show up in these databases as well. Don't discount business and industry as a source of funds, especially those businesses that have global presence, like Walmart, ExxonMobil, Coca-Cola. Sometimes it takes a bit more networking to get funds out of these programs. One of the best sources for finding non-federal foundation funding is through the Foundation Center, and I will speak more on that in a moment. This slide shows a list of the top foundations for giving through grant programs and through charitable donations. Again, it is important to understand the mission of the foundation and their focus before applying. These are just a few more examples of top giving foundations. The Foundation Center is the place to go to get information on fundraising, charitable programs, and foundation grant programs. They have a database of over 140,000 foundations with access to their programs online. They share information about who has received foundation funding and provide information on grant writing. Some of their services are free, like their short course on proposal development. Some of their services, like searching for a particular foundation, have a fee to use. I have provided a link at the bottom so you can go to the Foundation Center site. My current institution does not subscribe to the Foundation because we use a different service that I will describe in a moment. Likely many of you are familiar with or have heard about Horizon 2020. This is a European Union program with nearly 80 billion euros of funding available over a 7-year period between 2014 and 2020 to support research and innovation. Programs offered can support research in 22 main categories with subcategories under each. For example, if you click on energy, you will see that programs support research in non-nuclear energy like solar power, wind energy, hydro energy, and also support programs in nuclear energy. Horizon 2020 also has helpful tips on getting funded, opportunities for networking, and a list of their currently supported programs and organizations. A link to the 2020 website has been provided. Oftentimes, investigators are members of professional societies, just like I am a member of Incura. Many times, these professional organizations will have funding programs, just like Incura has a research program that offers funding to support projects to develop and sustain partnerships. This slide shows an example of research grants available through the American College of Sports Medicine. Oftentimes, the investigator must be a member of the professional organization to receive funding, but sometimes not. Finally, remind our investigators that as they read journal articles related to their research, they should look to see who's funding the study. Then they can go to that sponsor's website and learn more about their funding programs. Going directly to an agency website is another way to learn about their organization, their structure, their programs, and their review criteria, all of which are important for matching a funding opportunity with an idea. I've already talked about Grants.gov for finding federal assistance awards. FedBizOpps is where to look for federal procurement or contracts. Like Grants.gov, FedBizOpps has a free search mechanism on their website. For foundations, use the Foundation Center. But if you want a comprehensive list of federal and non-federal programs, consider subscribing to a paid service like Pivot, formerly called Community of Science, Grant Forward, Spin, or Grant Select. And don't discount the internet, though Google won't give you a very targeted search. Here I have included links to some subscription-based services. This list is not comprehensive, but it's many that U.S. institutions subscribe to. Currently, my institution subscribes to the InfoEd Global Suite. Spin is a searchable funding opportunity database. Genius is a profile system of keywords. And SMART matches the keywords with the funding opportunities in the database. Many of these databases are set up to work this way. Here is just an example of how you can search using this database. Notice it's a lot like the Grants.gov database, only this database includes federal and non-federal programs, as well as state programs. Again, you can search by applicant location, applicant type, project location, citizenship, and more. Using these filters is a good way to refine your search and hone in on that perfect funding opportunity. Here I briefly mentioned crowdfunding sites. The idea behind crowdfunding is to raise many small amounts of money from a large number of people to support a particular project. This is a giving or gift program, not a grant program, so there are no funding opportunity announcements. The common sites are listed here with links provided. The last one, Hawk's Nest, is unique to Miami faculty, staff, and students. Now I want to say a few words on searching databases. As you saw with Grants.gov and SPIN, you can search by certain criteria, such as the applicant location. I can tell this system that I am in the Americas, or North America, or the US, or Ohio. I can be as specific as I want, given the constraints of the system. Applicant type. I can tell the system if I am an individual or an organization. If an organization, I can specify if I am for-profit or not-for-profit. Project type. I might be looking for new project support, ongoing project support, or an academic or professional endeavor. Project location. This is where I physically want to conduct my project. Citizenship. There are a whole host of citizenship options in these databases. And sponsor type, such as industry, foundation, federal assistance. Apply search filters to liberally weed out information that's not applicable to your project goals. Remember when I mentioned keeping the budget in mind when searching for funds? Often you can set a minimum or maximum amount you want to search for, so you can filter out irrelevant programs. For example, if you need 1 million euros to complete your project, you might filter out those sponsors who only give in the thousands or 100,000 euro range. Some databases will also let you select currency type. While you can search many of these databases using your own keywords, it's better to access the list of words that populate the database, so you are searching using their keywords. If you know a funding opportunity number or a CFDA number, you can search using those numbers. However, we don't often know those numbers. And finally, many databases allow you to use Boolean operators to connect and define relationships between your search terms. For example, searching for maternal health or neonatal health will likely turn up more opportunities than searching for maternal health and neonatal health. And finally, don't discount unfunded collaborations. While unfunded, working with another investigator will help you expand networks and may result in a project that gets a sponsor's attention, or may result in a publication. So the unfunded collaboration might just lead to a funded collaboration later on. Also, it might lead to gaining access to people and non-people resources that would not otherwise be available. Several things to keep in mind. Oftentimes, when applying for U.S. federal funds, pre-approval is required by the agency. Having a U.S. collaborator may be very helpful or could be a program requirement. All non-U.S. partnerships should be justified. Really, any collaboration should be justified. And just remember, building relationships is beneficial to everyone. On this slide and the next slide, I've included a few agencies that support funding for non-U.S. entities. Here there are links provided as well. This concludes my presentation today. To find out more about NCURA, please go to www.ncura.edu. And if you have any questions about award negotiations, please feel free to, or about funding opportunities, please feel free to contact me at callahtl@miamioh.edu. If you have other questions about research administration, please contact Jesse Sixo, Director of NCURA Global at sveto@ncura.edu. We hope that you will be able to join us for next week's webinar. Robin Riglin, Senior Associate Director, Office of Sponsored Programs at the Pennsylvania State University, will be presenting on award negotiations. Just a reminder that the recording of the first webinar will be available on the Eurasia Foundation website by the end of the week. And before you exit this webinar, please fill in the post-webinar survey. You can find the link to the survey in the chat box. Thank you. Spasiba. You can start the Q&A by typing into your chat box. We have one question about what the RFQ, request for quotations, exactly means. An RFQ is issued for a procurement. So a procurement is a purchase service. Let's say an agency wants to build a bridge. They might put out a request for quotation or a request for bid. If you feel like you can build that bridge, you would submit to that organization how much you think it would cost to build the bridge, the materials you would need to use, any collaborations, and the amount of time it would take. The sponsor would then look over all of the requests for quotations or bids and go with the one they feel fits their needs the best. The next question, are there any specific resources or databases to search for U.S. collaborators? Actually, the subscription-based databases have profile information on collaborators. So we have our faculty enter their profile information into our database. Anybody else across the globe that uses the same database can then search for collaborators using that database. I believe all of these databases are subscription-based. Another way to do this is to go to the federal sponsor websites, because oftentimes the federal websites will list who received funds and for what type of project. They will even list an abstract of a funded project, and some agencies like the NIH list a copy of the full proposal so you can see who's doing what. Again, this would be a free way to try to find collaborators. Are Russian universities eligible to receive U.S. federal funding? Yes, in some cases. The agencies that I provided links to at the end of this presentation typically support non-U.S. federal entities in a variety of ways. It really varies by the agency and the program. So it's important just to go to those sites and read the information provided there. Is it usually the responsibility of the faculty to find the funding opportunity or the research administrator's responsibility? Well, like in most things in our area, it depends. At my institution and for many of my colleagues, it's the research administrator's responsibility, because part of our responsibility is to do research and proposal development for our faculty. One of the ways we do that is by helping them find an appropriate funding source. Now, we help the faculty put their profile information into our database, and from there they can do some searches themselves. It's good to empower them, but I would think typically most sponsored research offices are providing this assistance. Okay, the next question, how likely a group of researchers from Eastern Europe gets funding? Who's the results owner when the job is done? Should the work necessarily be done in the home country or the U.S.? Again, it really depends on the program. And as far as who owns what, that needs to be worked out in some type of memorandum of understanding prior to the work. So oftentimes when we apply to, particularly to federal programs with a non-U.S. counterpart, we have to show that we put some type of understanding in place with that non-U.S. counterpart that details who owns what, who's responsible for what, and where work is going to occur. Are gifts or donations included in funding schemes for non-U.S. entities? This information, you can find more on gifts on Foundation Center website. Foundation Center may list some charitable programs as well as grant giving programs, but you're not going to find information about gifts, donations on most of these tools I've shared with you today. Most of these tools are just going to have information on assistance programs or procurement programs. How does the financing of non-American entities work? Again, it really depends. At my institution, we have some contracts in place with folks in India. So what happens is we were awarded from a foundation, and then we send some of our funds to the institution in India. This is done, first of all, we set up a subcontract that lets them know how much to expect, what their budget is. It details their scope of work, so what it is they're going to do. And after they've done those things, they invoice us. And we actually have a wire transfer set up to give them their funds. So most grants operate on a cost reimbursable basis, so we don't get the money up front, therefore we don't send it up front. Instead, as we spend the money, according to the sponsor's guidelines, during the duration of the project, and on the things we said we'd spend the money on, we invoice the sponsor. In the same way, the non-U.S. entities invoice us to get their money. So the non-U.S. financing could be for salary needs for folks. It could be for travel. It could be for materials or supplies. Again, one size doesn't fit all. It really depends on the program. Some of the federal agencies might have counterparts also in other countries. So the funds aren't, for the non-U.S. entity, aren't coming from the U.S., but may be coming from the counterpart agency in another country. And then a question came in, can a non-U.S. institution sign up for Grants.gov? Is there anything different you need to do as a non-U.S. institution? The answer is yes, you can sign up for Grants.gov. And the area entitled Applicants in Grants.gov provides really great step-by-step information for signing up with Grants.gov, particularly if you are a non-U.S. entity. It will take you to this website to get your CFDA number, an EIN or a tax number, if applicable, to get registered in SAM. And those agencies have very detailed instructions on if you are a non-U.S. entity. Sometimes it takes longer. It could be weeks or even a month to get set up. So starting early is helpful. If you're starting to look for U.S. funding opportunities, whoops, the question just went away, for the first time, some of the first things to do, definitely go to Grants.gov and put in your eligibility information. That would be where I would start. You could also go to the CFDA, but I think Grants.gov is more user-friendly. What expenses should be included in the budget? It really depends on your program needs, whether it's materials or supplies that you need or money for travel. How realistic is it to get a grant from NIH for a non-U.S. organization if you don't have a U.S. partner organization? Probably not very realistic. Probably that you're going to need to have a U.S. partner organization. Are there a lot of applications from Russia that have gotten funding from one of the U.S. funding institutions last year? That information I don't know, but that information is available on the federal websites. All of the federal websites have an obligation to list where they spent their funds and where the money went to. So you can actually access that information on the federal websites. For the different subscription-based databases, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each? What's been your experience with the one that you've used? Well, we used to use Pivot Community of Science. I've been at institutions that have used both Pivot and Spin. The search results are very similar for the two. I find Pivot to be a little bit more user-friendly. However, the cost of the Spin database is significantly less, and I'm at a smaller institution that doesn't have a lot of money to support grant infrastructure. So we simply went with Spin because of cost. So really, I think it depends on your institution and the cost, but many of these databases will turn up very similar results. And you can do trials on these databases. That way you can do a comparison side by side to see which is easier to use, which may be more costly, which one might turn up funding opportunities that are more relevant for you. Do I recommend contacting the funding agency prior to applying for the grant? Absolutely. But I recommend that the investigator contact the agency, not the research administrator. The investigator best knows what he or she wants to do and can best communicate that to the funding agency. Now, it's important that before they contact the agency, they've done a bit of homework. They've read the solicitation, and they at least have a one-page document they can share that outlines what it is they want to do. How successful are crowdfunding sites for research projects? What percentage of the research is currently funded by crowdfunding, and is it likely to increase? Crowdfunding is very unique in that we have to use social media, and typically projects that are suitable, say for federal agencies, aren't suitable for crowdfunding projects. We are seeing more and more interest in investigators getting crowdfunding, and we've seen more investigators getting crowdfunding for smaller projects. At Miami, we developed a crowdfunding site that's focused on student projects. So the idea is to support these smaller student projects and to get our alumni and our donors donating to our student projects. Michigan Tech actually developed their own crowdfunding site. And again, we see more and more folks wanting to try projects that have local impact use these sites. So again, these projects are typically smaller in duration, they're smaller in impact, they have local impact, and they're smaller in the size of funds. They're not just traditional basic grant research. They're typically for some type of community outreach or public service project. Okay. The information for applying for a Horizon 2020 grant is explained very well on their website, so I would go to the website and read the information there. And you can look in general on how to apply or go to a specific program that you might be interested in, and there will be guidance there on how to apply for that specific program. The most, I was asked to repeat, the most accessible website for funding opportunities, that would be Grants.gov. Again, that is going to pull up federal funding opportunities, but that one is definitely the most accessible. Are there other questions? Again, I want to thank you for your time today. Also, you have my contact information. So if you have comments or questions after, please reach out to me. And also, before you sign out, please remember to take the survey. The link is provided in your chat box.